won their court case, so they're marching today.
What bums?
The fucking Nazi party.
Every time I sit down to do one of these, I think, it seems like it's going to make sense. And then I'm like, well, how do you even start? Oh, the ironies, the levels and levels of irony. So as we have learned, one thing that really bothers pseudoarchaeologists, Atlantis hunters, ancient lost technology people is being associated with racism and racists. It bugs them. That was one of Graham Hancock's big complaints when he went on Joe Rogan with Flint Dibble, is you called me a racist and it hurts my feelings.
You know perfectly well that saying that my work encourages white supremacism and encourages racism is going to end up with me being tarred as a racist. And you know very well that tarring somebody as a racist in this day, look, the results there, down there, make no mistake, Hancock is a white supremacist like Trump. TV out there, it's racist fiction pretending to be science.
These are not my words.
Look,
no,
I'm talking about your influence on media and culture.
You cite 19th century sources, you cite 16th century sources, and I label those as racist. And I see it as a problem to readapt those kind of sources without critiquing them.
And Flint explained that he didn't call him a racist directly. He said that those ideas resonate with white supremacy, and white supremacists find a lot to like in Graham Hancock's work. And by the way, that position was later confirmed by white supremacists, at least one, who came out and said that, watching Ancient Apocalypse was something he could do with his friends because it had a lot of ingredients of white supremacy in it, but it wasn't Third Reich archaeology. There weren't a bunch of swastikas and Hitler salutes flying around. Great. I first became aware of Dan Richards when he made a video about me after I did an interview with Seth Andrews, the thinking atheist, talking about, connections between racism and pseudoarchaeology and ancient aliens and that sort of stuff. And Dan went on and on and on about how, racism, calling people racist doesn't have the power that you think it does, and yada, yada, yada. So lo and behold, here's a Dan Richards gift to the world. He goes on Joe Rogan again, and he said, but, there are, Graham Hancock's not a racist, but there are some.
Them hitting him with the racist thing in particular, that's good. Graham, that hits him. That hurts him.
He's very sensitive.
He doesn't, and that kind of shit, man. There are people that are Atlantis hunters today. There's the guy, Robert Sepehr. I hate to say his name even, but I will because he needs to be put on blast a bit.
And one of them is Robert Sepehr or Sepehr. Nobody's really sure how to say the guy's name. I'll just call him Robert S. Robert S. Let me get the book. So this is the Robert S. book that I am familiar with. We went through this book in one of the years of the course I taught at University of South Carolina, Forbidden Archaeology. I had the students go through it chapter by chapter and critique it, and we wrote they wrote blog posts about it. I read this book very carefully a few years ago now. It's been a few years. Old man brain, one of the worst pieces of fake scholarship I have ever seen. And if you do not get the white supremacy threads coming through this thing, I don't know how to help you, because it is fairly blatant.
Since then, especially during the last decade or so, it's been conclusively proven by DNA sequencing that the various human races came about by different admixture of different hominin species. The dominant contribution that we all share is Cro-Magnon. It was a seafaring race that traveled all around the globe. I guess you could call it similar to colonialism, and it interbred wherever it went.
And all of the quote-unquote errors in it all lean towards, white people being the best race and the founders of civilization and all this other kind of stuff. Look at the dude. look at his logo. That is basically, he should have to pay like a licensing fee to the Third Reich, because that is basically a Nazi eagle with the swastika removed. So it's not a secret. The white supremacists, they're not even overtones. They're more than overtones. They are the main tones. They are the harmonies, and the melodies are not a secret here. So Dan, fairly said, hey, there are some people that really are blatantly racist in Atlantis hunting, and here's one of them. And then he did a video about explaining that, and boy, did he get a shit ton of comments on it from his fans that basically are saying, how dare you call out racism because we're all racists. You know, and it's torturously painful to listen to Dan dance around, you know, why Robert S. is wrong about things, and then at the very end he finally calls him out and says, well, he's a racist or something like that. I'll find the clip.
Robert removes data from his shit in order to make his case, and that's a problem, okay? That's a problem because he doesn't care what the real answer is. He cares what his answer is borne out to be true. And that, my friends, I don't care if you are big pharma, if you are big freaking science, if you are big tobacco, if you're big sugar. I don't care if you're Flint Dibble and you're woke, okay? Flint's woke, big pharma, big sugar, all these guys, they're all like, it's simple with them. They're just fucking greedy, right? But what would you call Robert? What would you call Robert? Racist. Fucking racist, right? They're clearly white supremacist, racist. And that's why I said what I said on the Joe Rogan Experience.
But he's so carefully, like, he wants to say that, you know, his problem with Robert S. is not just that he's a racist, but it's because he's employing an ideology to cherry pick his facts, and he's not telling you the whole story. And we would apply that same standard to anybody, to big tobacco, to big sugar, to Flint Dibble, to everybody else. You know, good people on both sides. And the comments, well, let's go through some of the comments. Let me see here.
It's me on the Joe Rogan Experience, and I'm calling out Robert Sepehr for saying,
oh boy, you're brave. Okay, let's look at some of the comments. Just look at the top comments here. You and Robert should have a conversation. The public smear wasn't fair. Robert may have his issues, but he's 100% right on the out of Africa theory being obsolete. I've got to say, you sounded exactly like Graham Hancock's detractors. If I hadn't known better, I would have thought I was listening to Minuteman. Seriously. I remember when those Europeans were found mummified in China. I'm very happy to say I don't know. If that makes me racist, fine. I still don't know. I do like logic, though. Dan, my man, I love and appreciate your work, and I'm with you since you had a few subscribers only, same as with Robert. But what you said that Robert claims in his videos is utterly false. I'm a Robert Sepehr fan, and I don't care what people think. I enjoy his work and his theories. This was not it, man. I feel like you just have some personal vendetta against Robert. It's a problem if Sepehr is dishonest, but I don't care if he's, quote, racist. In my opinion, there's nothing more racist than the out of Africa theory that posits that modern-day sub-Saharan Africans represent humans' oldest archaic lineage. You have forgotten that far-out theories is why we are all here. You've turned into gatekeeper, Dan. Do you think Africa has been pushed with an agenda? Because now we've seen how governments, foundations, and NGOs can partner with science and media to push ideologies. I don't view Robert as racist. I quite value his work. Where is academia telling us there were blonde-haired, blue-eyed rulers, gods, venerated people across so many civilizations? It seems as if facts from our past are not being taught or even brought up. Yet Robert is. Click, 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 click. And they go on. What's interesting to me here is Dan being the person who has positioned himself as a defender of those who get called racist by us, quote-unquote, mainstream archaeologists. You know, we're going to defend Graham Hancock and we're going to defend Ignatius Donnelly and these other people. There's really not an important strain of racism in Atlantis hunting. But, Dan says, there are some people that are racist. And boy, did he ever make the racists mad by pointing that out. And what's really funny, entertaining, and telling is, just as Dan said before that, you know, calling something racist doesn't have the power that you think it does. A lot of these people freely admit, hey, maybe it's racist. I don't know. I still think the guy's right. You might as well walk around with a t-shirt that says, I can't think my way out of a paper bag. If you can't look at a book like this and do some elementary school fact checking, like try to find his sources, try to see where he's getting his information, all you want to do is swallow that stuff, and you don't care if it's racist or not. You know, maybe you're in the right place with Dan's channel. Maybe you ought to stick with him. This is the hard part about trying to pick a side, I guess, or trying to, you know, put things into this binary. of the people who want to take a wide view of the world and look at the history of these ideas and think about what they mean. And then those who just want to rail against anything that is mainstream because somebody dangles a little bit of meat in front of them and they just snatch it up. They can't help themselves. You know, and the problem with this for pseudoarchaeology is that Robert S. is part of your group. And a lot of you apparently want him in that group. He is your champion. As he says, I've got 500,000 followers on YouTube, whatever. He's important to you. He's one of your main voices. And the dude literally flies the Nazi eagle on his book. That's what you want. He's part of the club. So these other people who, you know, to Dan's credit, he tries to distance himself a little bit from that stuff, but it's watching him attempt to dance around it's painful, even for me. And I don't mind watching Dan dance on the coals a little bit, especially when they're coals that he put there himself and he decides to go dance on them. Have at it. That's all you. But he's in the club. He's in the same club as Graham Hancock. He's in the same club as Dan. He's in the same club as what's the big Scablands guy, Randall Carlson. They're all in the club together. I don't see most of these guys saying, you know what? Robert S. is really not part of our club. We really don't want that stuff. Sure, he's in the club. Come along. A few years ago, Jason Calavito wrote a post, I think, called, let's see. So a Jason Calavito blog post from April of 2014, over 10 years ago, Fringe History's Frank Joseph Problem. I think that's what I'll call this video. I'll call it Pseudoarchaeology's Robert Sepehr Problem. If you don't know, Frank Joseph is a guy who writes books about Atlantis. He's part of the Atlantis Club. He was the leader of some branch of the American Nazi Party, like actually wore uniforms, swastikas, everything, was involved in the march at Skokie that I think went to the Supreme Court. He got kicked out of the Nazis for being a pedophile, went to jail. In jail, he met a guy named Russell Burroughs, if anybody has heard of Burroughs Cave in Illinois, that Frank Joseph was also involved in. It's a whole long story. These two probably cooked up the idea when Frank Joseph, who was in prison as Frank Collin at the time, that was his name, met Russ Burroughs, and then there was this fraudulent bunch of tales about a cave that had Egyptian artifacts and gold. And then Wayne May gets involved too, an Ancient American magazine. So all this shit is all tied up in this big shit sandwich with this American Nazi pedophile.
Illinois Nazis. I hate Illinois Nazis.
He gets out of jail, changes his name from Frank Collin to Frank Joseph, and starts writing books about Atlantis. He's in the club. However, if you were in Fringe History, you run in all the same circles as Frank Joseph. Frank Joseph was publishing Scott Walter, Lost Worlds of Ancient America. Other Fringe figures who have published with or written for Frank Joseph include Brad Steiger, Zechariah Sitchin, Laura Lee, Andrew Collins, Gunnar Thompson, David Childress, Cyclone Covey, and of course Joseph's longtime colleague, the Mormon hyperdiffusionist Wayne May. So when you welcome one of these guys into the club, you use his resources, you provide him with resources and support, you share a fan base, you kind of own it at that point. So if you don't want Robert S. in the club, you should do something about it. And so, like, I give Dan a point for at least having his heart in the right place and at least not being so scared of Robert's following that he is chilled into not calling him out or not saying something. Silence is consent, or it's acquiescence, or it's agreement, or whatever, or at least that's how it appears. So if you don't like this guy being in your club, you should say something. If you don't say anything, you know, you just go along to get along. Everybody's fine. We're all going to make our dollars off selling books or doing whatever we're doing. And it's all just a big, happy family of people talking about Atlantis and white colonizers and all that. And it's fun. And, some could be Nazis. Some could. They could. But that's okay because I'm not. I'm not a Nazi. Same arguments that Graham Hancock makes and that all kinds of other Atlantis hunters make. Whoops, upside down. Same arguments. You got your DNA evidence. You've got some stuff about geology. You've got migrations, skeletons, mythology, sculpture, ancient languages, all that good stuff, all wrapped in there. Just that he packages it with, an SS wrapper around it. Graham Hancock packages it something different. It's the same stuff. Same stuff. White supremacists love it all. And they love him maybe most of all. So he's a member of your club. And that's your problem. He's a member of your club until you tell him that he's not. Good luck with that. While you're at it, why don't you just invite Frank Joseph to start speaking at the Cosmic Summit and other places too. Why not? They're all just ideas, right? We're all just giving out ideas. All the ideas are of equal value, right? That's what we're doing. We don't really, I wasn't there, you weren't there. We don't really have any way to say who's right and who's wrong. All of our ideas are equal. There's good people on both sides. You mainstream archaeologists are just hiding the truth, and that's what his fans really like, is he's going to bust through that, and he's going to give it to you straight. I defy you, any people who like Robert Sepehr's book, go out and do some work yourself. Just look at what he is writing, check some of his facts. Sure, not everything in there is wrong, but think about the way he's putting things together and think about why that resonates with a certain crowd. And if you want to see who that crowd is, go look at the comments on Dan's video. That's all I have to say about that. I hope you guys have a good rest of your weekend.